This is an essay about The Stranger by Camus. Almost everyone who's read The Stranger has been troubled by Meursault. He seems cold and different and more than a little strange. Perhaps Camus meant Meursault's world to reflect the madness of a society shattered on the anvil of war by the hammer of industrialized violence. Maybe Meursault's unfair life is a more mundane expression of our lack of control, where even our good deeds betray us. Meursault is unique, and then no more. But that doesn't mean he is meaningless. Even from Meursault, we can learn about ourselves. Camus gives us a chance to see the world through a stranger's eyes. Why shouldn't we accept the challenge? Both the director of the home and even the state itself approve of Meursault's putting Maman in the home. The director says to Meursault, "You don't have to justify yourself, my dear boy. I've read your mother's file. You weren't able to provide for her properly. She needed someone to look after her. You earn only a modest salary." Given his modest salary, Meursault could only provide for her properly by sending her to the home. Would the director address Meursault in such endearingly warm terms as "my dear boy" if he thought this was mistreatment? Moreover, the director attempts to allay any guilt Meursault might feel at having been unable to look after her by explaining, and the truth of the matter is, she was happier here. We know this to be true and simply not a lie of consolation because Madame Meursault had a boyfriend, Thomas. Meursault didn't abandon, neglect, or punish Maman. He cared for her the best he could while she was alive. In fact, his behavior has the imprimatur of the state. As Meursault's lawyer points out, can the usefulness and importance of such institutions be questioned, since it is the state itself which utilizes them or subsidizes them? The state provides a humane remedy for Meursault's impecunious circumstances. It gives Maman what he can't. However, according to the staff of the home, giving to Maman shouldn't stop with death. The caretaker expects Meursault to view the body of his mother as a traditional rite of respect. He offers to unscrew the casket for Meursault so that he can see her. When stopped, the caretaker asks Meursault, "You don't want to?" Behind the question is an accusation of impropriety. Meursault breaks with tradition. Though the caretaker says, "I understand," he really doesn't. He's a traditional man. Meursault, however, is not. And this is the origin of their misunderstanding. Meursault lives in the present. The only guarantee he has in life is now. From this perspective, the best time to show love, care, and respect is while loved ones are alive. In regards to his mother, Meursault does this. As a result, she finds happiness at the home. There, she had friends. Then she died. Is she aware of any expression of emotion from her son after her death? We can't know, and neither can he. Seeing a dead body is a meaningless gesture to Meursault. Surrounding death is a ceremony of tradition, and Meursault consistently fails to honor it. Seemingly innocuous actions are indictments against Meursault because they reveal he is the stranger. Describing social solecisms committed by Meursault at his mother's wake, Camus writes, "I drank the coffee, then I felt like having a smoke, but I hesitated because I didn't know if I could do it with Maman right there. I thought about it. It didn't matter. I offered the caretaker a cigarette and we smoked. According to the traditional rules of respect for the dead, mourners should refrain from personal indulgences like drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes. Though Meursault hesitated, he does it anyway. Even with Maman right there, he concludes it didn't matter. Why? Meursault lives in the moment, and why should he deny himself petty pleasures that harm no one, especially the dead? Meursault is not selfish. Otherwise, he wouldn't have offered the caretaker a cigarette. But he does satisfy his desires, often without delay, and for some who surround him, this is his crime. Later, the caretaker's testimony at the trial confirms this. I know I was wrong to do it, but I couldn't refuse this cigarette when Monsieur offered it to me. Meursault doesn't care about offending the dead because they are dead. According to Meursault, smoking and drinking coffee in front of his mom's body don't disqualify him from having been a good son. He cared about his mother while she was alive, but others don't see it that way. During the trial, the prosecuting lawyer states, indeed, the gentlemen of the jury will take note that a stranger may offer a cup of coffee, but beside the body of the one who brought him into the world, a son should have refused it. Nonetheless, following the traditional rites of mourning can sometimes conceal less than selfless motives. The crying woman at the wake represents a traditional reaction to the death of someone close, mourning. Describing an incident at the wake, Camus writes, soon, one of the women started crying. She was crying softly, steadily, in little sobs. I thought she'd never stop. I wished I didn't have to listen to her anymore. With her little sobs, the crying woman publicly shows how much she cared for the deceased. At least that is how observers might characterize it. Witnessing her crying softly and steadily, we would assume the bonds of friendship between the two were no less steady, and that the crying woman's sense of loss justifies the tears. However, Meursault is unmoved by any sympathy for her, but rather annoyed and wishes that he didn't have to listen to her anymore. His lack of emotion seems to reveal his lack of concern for the dead, as well as the living. The crying of the woman, that seemingly never stops, intimates the opposite. We'd all conclude how greatly she must have cared for the dead, but we'd be wrong. The caretaker explains to Meursault, she was very close to your mother. She says your mother was her only friend, and now she hasn't got anyone. She doesn't want to be alone. Meursault's mother was her escape from solitude. She fears a future without a friend and grieves for her own fate. In contrast, if Meursault has such feelings, they are fleeting. Not a prisoner of even the most recent past, Meursault lives in the moment. The day of his mother's funeral doesn't prevent Meursault from feeling joy, not mere relief upon entering the nest of lights that was Algiers, but positive joy. This, of course, is not a feeling we'd expect from a loving son who just buried his mother. We might be guilty of seeing the world as the director, the caretaker, the wailing woman, and Maman's boyfriend do. Traditional. Yet Meursault isn't a traditional man, but the stranger, whose nature was such that present physical needs often got in the way. Needing to go to bed and sleep for 12 hours erased all thoughts of his mother from Meursault's mind. But this does not mean that he wasn't a good son to his mother while she was alive. Which is better, that we enjoy love while we're alive, or that we're given love after our death? The traditional people that surround Meursault seem to value love of the dead over the life of the living. And all those wake wailers and funeral mourners would be stunned into silence if they knew what Meursault does the day after Maman's funeral. What kind of son goes to the beach the day after burying his mother? The stranger. After his swim with Marie, Meursault puts on the clothes he'd worn the day before. Camus writes, once we were dressed, She seemed very surprised to see I was wearing a black tie, and she asked me if I was in mourning. I told her my mom had died. She wanted to know how long ago, so I said, yesterday. She gave a little start, but didn't say anything. Clearly, she's not thinking about my mom at all. One might ask why Merceau even bothered to wear a black tie. His clothes may be mourning, but he certainly isn't. When asked by Marie how long ago his mother died, Merceau doesn't dissemble the fact that she died yesterday. In response, Marie gave a little start, an unconscious reaction of shock. After all, she's a traditional girl, and her not saying anything is the same reaction of bewilderment expressed by the caretaker's perfunctory, I understand. They don't understand Merceau's actions, because he's the stranger and not traditional like them. Being misunderstood, at least, doesn't prevent Merceau from making the most of his chance meeting with Marie at the beach. He wakes the following morning to the salty smell Marie's hair had left on the pillow. Merceau moves fast with Marie, and even his virtues seem to hurt her. We might not like Merceau as a boyfriend for Marie, but we can't say he's dishonest. Having spent the night with Merceau, Marie greets him with an obvious question. But she doesn't get the expected reply. Camus writes, "A minute later she asked me if I loved her. I told her it didn't mean anything, but that I didn't think so. She looked sad. But as we were fixing lunch, and for no apparent reason, she laughed in such a way that I kissed her." In this situation, he has every motive to lie. Any man would want his pleasing girlfriend to spend the night, and continue to do so. Most wouldn't say anything to make her disappear. But when Marie asked Merceau if he loved her, he didn't lie. I told her it didn't mean anything, but that I didn't think so. Would a majority of men have been as honest? Unlikely. We can't help but admit that Marie's reaction is equally unlikely. She only looked sad, and even allowed herself to be kissed by Merceau. Maybe she's sympathizing with her punisher. Or, more likely, she's simply not immune to love's occasional irrationality. Though wanting marriage might not be irrational, Marie and Merceau are not equally eager for it. Marie makes a bet with the future, and she doesn't understand Merceau's indifference at doing the same. She proposes marriage to Merceau. Camus writes, "That evening Marie came by to see me and asked me if I wanted to marry her. I said it didn't make any difference to me and that we could if she wanted to. I explained to her that it didn't really matter and that if she wanted to, we could get married. Besides, she was the one doing the asking, and all I was saying was yes." Merceau and Marie have different attitudes about marriage, and it is important to understand the origin of this difference. Merceau lives ever presently in the now. For Merceau, marriage doesn't make any difference because there is nothing more meaningful and real than the present moment he shares with Marie. And from this perspective, marriage is a bet with the future, deferred happiness, only a promise. By wanting Merceau to marry her, Marie might be implying that the now she shares with Merceau is less than complete. Her happiness isn't entirely centered in the present moment, which, however, is more secure and certain. The present or the future? To Merceau, marriage didn't really matter, because if it didn't happen, it wouldn't diminish the now that he experiences. Furthermore, as Merceau points out, Marie was the one doing the asking, and this reveals that she wants more than the present. For Marie, now is a lack, filled by the future. She's not wholly present in the moment. However, the future is an unhealthy place to live. Marie's suffering can only be made worse by living for a tomorrow that's increasingly unlikely. Visiting Marceau in prison, Marie still has hope for the future. She says to him, "You'll get out, and we'll get married." Before Marceau went to prison, Marie was already living for the future, and after he enters prison, she seemingly has uh, no choice. Uh, but we have no control over tomorrow. To say we will do something is to express a desire, a hope, a wish, but not a certainty. Marie's belief that she'll get married when Marceau gets out is not fulfilled by the future. Marie is betrayed by chance. As she couldn't predict their relationship would start on a beach, she can't control that it ends there as well. As she's visiting him in prison, she continues to live in a dream called the future. But this delusion can't protect her from pain. Marie is hurt by Marceau, by bad luck, and by the future. But she's not alone in her pain. Marceau hurts as well. Marceau's own virtue leads him to tragedy. Testifying during the trial, Marceau's friend Celeste says, "The way I see it, it's bad luck. Everybody knows what bad luck is. It leaves you defenseless. There it is. The way I see it, it's bad luck." Celeste sees that Marceau's a victim of his own bad luck. That event people can't predict or control. Celeste is, of course, right. We are all defenseless against it, even more so when we're doing good. In Raymond's confrontation with the Arab, Marceau admonishes his friend, "If he doesn't draw his knife, you can't shoot." Marceau has a sense of fair play. This is his undoing. In talking his friend out of committing murder, Marceau ends up with the gun. According to the Japanese writer Haruki Murakami, the Russian writer Chekhov believes that once a gun appears in a story, it has to be fired. And later alone, Marceau takes one step toward the Arab, who in response drew his knife. No one with any sense brings a knife to a gunfight. The Arab wants to avenge his sister. It doesn't mean he wants to die. The Arab simply didn't know Marceau had the gun. Out of self-defense, Marceau fires the gun. As Celeste observes, it's bad luck. Two unlucky men, strangers to one another, meet on a beach in a scene that could have been written by Chekhov. After bad luck, we have only our bad choices to blame. Both his circumstances and his attitude imprison Marceau. Describing his initial reaction to prison, Marceau states, "When I was first in prison, my thoughts were still those of a free man. For example, I would suddenly have the urge to be on a beach and to walk down to the water. All of a sudden, I would feel just how closed in I was by the walls of my cell." Celeste appears correct. Marceau is defenseless, in prison, and under attack from his understanding of freedom. As a free man, Marceau often enjoyed days at the beach. Prison hasn't removed the urge, just made its satisfaction impossible. As a result, Marceau feels just how closed in he is by the walls that surround him. However, the walls of his cell are not just those built by justice, but they are the ones he's made himself. His own understanding of what it means to be a free man condemns him. The justice system uses Marceau's own urges against him. For example, Marceau explains, "I was tormented by my desire for a woman. It was only natural. I was young. My cell would be filled with their faces and crowded with my desire. Crowded with my desires. Being unable to satisfy his desire for a woman is also an expression of his freedom. Those natural but unsatisfied desires that crowded around him were just more handles by which the justice system could hold him. Of course, that's the point. They've taken away your freedom, the head guard affirms. Otherwise, he questions, what would be the punishment? Meursault's own definition of freedom becomes part of the cell that holds him. Even the petty pleasures of smoking, even the petty pleasure of smoking is used against Meursault. Camus writes, there were the cigarettes too. Once I was in my cell, I asked to have them back, but I was told I wasn't allowed. His cigarettes are an innocuous indulgence that didn't hurt anybody. But when Meursault asked to have them back, he wasn't allowed. Every expression of Meursault's freedom imprisons him: the beach, women, and even smoking. Freedom for Meursault begins and ends with the body. And the justice system has control over his body. Camus shows us how our own ideas and desires can hurt us. Meursault can't change his circumstances, but he is still free to change his attitude. That is exactly what he does. The policemen told me we had to wait for the judges, and one of them offered me a cigarette, which I turned down. The freedom of the stranger is, in part, not wanting what can't be had. For Meursault, cigarettes are somewhat easier to give up than women, but eventually he learns to live without them as well. It also occurred to me that maybe she was sick or dead. These things happen. How was I to know, since apart from our two bodies, now separated, there wasn't anything to keep us together or even to remind us of each other? Anyway, after that, remembering Marie meant nothing to me. I wasn't interested in her dead. What does it mean that Meursault's remembering Marie meant nothing? Again, we have to view the world as Meursault does if we wish to understand him. In the now of his prison life, they are separated by cell walls, Marie's possible sickness, or even her death. Meursault's life hasn't been free of bad luck. So why should he be any less free of it behind bars? These things happen, as he knows all too well. No one is immune to chance. However, Meursault doesn't have to be tortured by it. If what enriches life most is our relationship to others, then it can equally be a source of suffering. In fact, when Meursault first arrives to his lonely cell, he does suffer because his thoughts were still those of a free man. Bad luck had made bad circumstances. No amount of unfulfilled desire can change them. Marie meant nothing to Meursault because prison is continuing to be interested in what can't be. He has to abandon his old definition of freedom for a new one. Unable to change the accidents of circumstance, Meursault finds a new freedom by accepting everything he's lost, life's loneliness, and his inevitable end. The chaplain challenges Meursault. I know that at one time or another you've wished for another life. The chaplain tempts Meursault in his solitude and suffering. The chaplain wants Meursault to deny the life that's led him to his cell. But Meursault refuses. He refuses to hate his life because wishing to be rich, to be able to swim faster, or to have a more nicely shaped mouth is simply meaningless. It's not the life he has. Nonetheless, the chaplain persists and wanted to know how I pictured this other life. presumably the one that didn't end in prison for Marceau. Yet, Marceau has courage beyond the chaplain's ken, and Marceau answers the question, one where could remember this life. In embracing his life, Marceau escapes its torture. He becomes truly free, and even prison walls can't take away his newfound freedom. This shift in attitude is the key that unlocks his cell door. Marceau has learned something new, but we learn as well. Marceau helps us realize that now is the most important moment. The chaplain asks Marceau, "Do you really love this earth as much as that?" The chaplain's question only confirms how Marceau has lived his life in the now, and it further illustrates the conflict between traditional people and the stranger. Yes, Marceau loves this earth. Living for anything after death is a bet with the future that he's unwilling to make. Both Marie and the chaplain share in a traditional faith. What is beyond the present moment is no less real, no less important, and perhaps no less certain. All too often, we can walk through life guided by the promise of tomorrow. Routine numbs us to the reality that familiar paths traced in summer skies could lead as easily to prison as to the sleep of the innocent. If there is a safeguard against chance and uncertainty, it lies in not neglecting the present. To do otherwise is unhealthy. In fact, love of this life is a measure of one's health. Marceau didn't forget about Maman. In fact, she's his role model. So close to death, Maman must have felt free then and ready to live it all again. Nobody had the right to cry over her. And I felt ready to live it all again too. We should love our lives so much that we're willing to live them again and again. If we don't love our life, then we should change how we're living it through our actions. If we can't, then we at least are always free to change our attitude about the life that we have. Neither path to this freedom of the stranger is easy. Nothing worth doing ever is. This kind of health isn't without effort, and maybe Maman was healthiest just before her death, because she felt free and ready to live it all again. Marceau believes people are misguided and crying over her. They're mourning her loss, not celebrating her success. Maman sets an example for Marceau to follow, and he does. I felt ready to live it all again too. If Hemingway was correct when he wrote that man is not made for defeat, then Marceau faces his own end undefeated. For everything to be consummated, for me to feel less alone, I had only to wish that there be a large crowd of spectators the day of my execution, and that they greet me with cries of hate. Marceau's rebellion is his triumph. His death is our example. Success is never guaranteed, but giving up certainly ensures failure. At least, we should have the courage to rebel.